aim is to achieve operational efficiency and financial viability. Because we're a Schedule 2 entity, we really need to demonstrate that, and we need to meet both state obligations and our growth imperatives within the compliance frameworks. That is very important. And with that, we do have the key performance indicators with targets that I will be showing in the subsequent slides, that we're looking at the group net profit after tax going forward. We are looking at Safari 1 availability, which is our nuclear reactor, which is the center and the engine of the heartbeat of our organization and our throughput on products, especially the radioisotopes, which are a profitable enterprise by itself. And then we look at the percentage implementation of the decontamination and decommissioning plan. This is a specific state mandate that the department has given to us to decommission primarily at this point in time the old disused nuclear facilities that were used in the previous programs. So we also look at safety, which is disabling injury rate. Apologies for just the acronym. Next time we'll put it in full, just like the DND. So safety becomes important. Where a nuclear facility will always have to demonstrate the highest levels of safety, including the 5th KPI, which is the environmental index, which encompasses public dose. Then the second KPA, which is research, development, and innovation, has transitioned from what we saw as a pure research function and also an element of getting some revenue from research to an area where we are saying as a fundamental objective, we need to advance nuclear science and technology through research and development, innovation, and international collaboration. And that has got 2 key performance indicators, which are the number of technologies implemented or commercialized, at least 1 product a year. So for each of the 3 years of the corporate plan, we want to give a throughput of commercializing 1 product per year. So which means after 3 years, it will be 3 products. And on the strategy period of 5 years, it will be 5 products. It's very important to state that even the isotopes that we sell profitably into the greater world, the US, Europe, Asia, and into the African continent, that is NECSA IP, NECSA developed IP, and we really are looking at ensuring that we give more of those products that are locally and domestically developed and commercialized, including the Pelchem business. Pelchem business has got some products in the form of xenon difluoride, which are very marketable globally. Those are also NECSA-owned IP, very important. So I'm just saying, just to build on top of those 2 products and others, we want to develop more and more of the impactful projects and commercialize them. But also, we need not to forget that as a research institution, we need to look at research outputs, and these are in the form of peer-reviewed articles. So I'll show the targets in the next slide. So this KPA looks at both commercial aspects of research and development and innovation, as well as the fundamental research in the form of peer-reviewed articles. Then the 3rd program is around the growth programs, which I believe is the center of this new strategy, which is about growth. And really, we want to grow and mature the income and influence through delivery for economically viable projects that have socio-economic impact. And with these, we're talking about several. We've selected key projects on these programs that we highlighted in the past, in the earlier slides. First one is the multi-purpose reactor, which is a research reactor, just like we have at Safari. So we've got some key milestones that are related to that reactor. Our biggest milestone for this financial year is to go out into the market and with a request for proposal. Then the next one, number 9, is the front-end fuel supply, which means the value chain around conversion, enrichment, and fabrication of fuel. We've got specific milestones related to those that we want to see achieved in this financial year and going forward. Then number 10 talks to a small modular reactor, which is a different reactor to number 8, which is the MPR. So MPR is a pure research reactor. a small modular reactor is currently being touted globally as that reactor for producing electricity. But ours, we want to ensure that we use it for also multiple purposes in the form of electricity generation, process heating, especially for those companies that use a lot of heat like refineries, the steel industry, etc. So if this reactor could be placed next to one of those, they would achieve multiple outcomes in terms of decarbonization, both in the form of electricity as well as their process heat input. And last but not least, we also want to explore producing of isotopes using a small modular reactor as well. That is being done by some types of reactors in the world, where you generate isotopes from a power reactor. But that's not the reactor we have, and we want to experiment with that. And that small modular reactor is aimed as a demonstration reactor on our site with a long-term view of deploying it in the Eskom coal fleet when we repurpose the coal plants. And there is a strong alignment here with Eskom in that they understand exactly the trajectory we're taking in the form of us developing a demonstration reactor. And when it's commercialized, then Eskom can use a commercialized reactor. We have gone out into the market with this one for the expression of interest at the end of March. We've had a clarification meeting with some of the suppliers on the 16th of April. There was a very good turnout, and we are very optimistic that around this time next year, we should be well on our way of having identified a partner that we can partner with to develop this reactor at the NECSA site. So I think going forward, it's important to state that we foresee that we'll be having 3 nuclear reactors on our site, one being Safari that is currently operating, the second one being the multi-purpose reactor, which will ultimately succeed Safari, and then the third one being the demonstration small modular reactor for multiple purposes that we want to demonstrate as a research and development institute. Then once again, on number 11, we want to strengthen and solidify on our radioisotope programs, growing isotopes. The World Health Organization is on record having indicated that there will be growth in terms of lifestyle diseases like cancer, and our isotopes are targeted towards cancer detection and cancer treatment. That's the current ones that we produce are geared towards that and for some industrial non-destructive applications. And we want to really grow the suite and the catalog of the isotopes that we have to ensure that we meet those industrial goals and demands. And then the thriving fluorochemical business, this is the Pelchem business. So number 11 was the NTP business. Number 12 is the Pelchem business, and both these are our 100% owned subsidiaries. So the fluorochemical business, we really need to reinvent from the beginning because we've been hit by many things. Our volumes are not geared for being commercially competitive out there. And now, whatever facilities we're going to be talking about, these are facilities that are studied to be commercially viable. The other facilities that we used to use here were really geared for NECSA internal programs. They were not geared for competing with those products in the international market, and also they had aged. So multiple fronts that have hit Pelchem. But those are the growth programs and initiatives that we want to embark on. And like I always say, we could have all those great plans in KPA 1, 2, and 3. Without talent and skills, we cannot move anywhere. So our fourth pillar, or fourth branch, becomes talent excellence and skills development. Here, I want to build a future-ready, inclusive, and high-performing workforce for NECSA and the nuclear industry in South Africa through talent development, succession planning, and transformation initiatives, because transformation stays the essence of what we do. So I want to look at, in the form of the KPIs, the capacity building for the nuclear industry and the service offering by our NECSA Learning Academy. We're looking at the percentage performance against the transformation plan, as well as the skills required for growth programs that should be developed at that point in time. So in essence, those are our 15 KPIs. Even in the last strategy, we had 15 KPIs. We've stuck to the 15 because we realized that just over a dozen KPIs do give us a clear focus in terms of what we want to deliver. So as we go into the multiple years with all those 4 KPAs and 15 KPIs, is we look at the growth in terms of for each of those KPIs, in that for net profit after tax, we're looking at profit, mega profit, and primarily because we are going to be going into a growth phase, which requires a lot of recapitalization, reinvestment into our business. So we're not looking at huge profits for the next 3 years. Similarly with Safari availability, we are stagnant at 287 days, and that is by design. It's been like that for many years. This is a reactor that was commissioned in 1965. We run a very good program to maintain it through replacement of some obsolete components and actively managing and maintaining any of the components that we have. So that aging management program, that was the word I was looking for. The aging management program that we run in alignment with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has actually given us a very good delivery in that we've been having this 287 days for the last couple of years. It gives us enough time to maintain the plant while also giving a little bit of a room for unplanned maintenance, because it is a facility and there are periods of downtime, but we are monitoring those very closely. But 287 days has led us to profitability as it pertains to the isotope generation using that reactor. So that becomes an optimum sweet point for us to operate the reactor in. And the third one, the D&D, decommissioning and decontamination plan, we're talking about 95% of implementation of that annual plan. So these annual plans change every year, so 95% all the way through. Similarly with the disabling injury rate, less than 1.8, which is the industry norm for a industry of this complexity. And then the environmental index has got multiple elements in it, and it is we're targeting that we meet 100% or 1 on that one. Now on the next one, which is the research, development and innovation, once again, the new technologies implemented, 1 each year, commercialized, and hopefully starting to make money once we commercialize them. So 1 each year, which means at the end of the period, we'll have 3 products. And then number 7 is the research outputs in the form of peer-reviewed articles. We keep that at 20 because we want to maintain the balance of just being a research entity with no commercialized items. So we split our stuff between fundamental research and as well as commercializing some of our products. And then in terms of the other programs, growth programs in the form of the MPR project at number 8, front-end fuel supply at number 9, SMR project at number 10, as well as number 11 on the radioisotope products. We've got project plans on this, just like we have on the D&D plan. We want to implement 95% of our project plans on each of these, and what we'll do going forward is that we'll report on the key milestones for each of these for the year. Instead of just saying the plan is 95% implemented, but importantly is the key milestones for each of the financial years. And also number 12, then we look at the fluorochemical business index that will stay at 85% for the period. I know that one of the slides shows 80 to 85%, but our target is really 85% because this is a different business to the NTP business, and we need to manage it differently. And then on skills development, so our NLA offering, we want to improve it by 1% for the year that we've just started. I foresee us changing those percentages in the subsequent years, but at this point in time, we started with that lower base so that we create a very good foundation going forward. And the performance against the transformation plan, moving from 50% to 75%. And then the skills required for the growth, we need to develop program plans and move on in the subsequent years in terms of implementation of the approved plan at 90% going forward. So in essence, that's a 3-year view, but if we just now show the picture for the current year under discussion. It is very clear with the only one correction I want to make on number 7 in terms of those annual targets is 20 number of research outputs. These outputs are actually peer-reviewed papers, not innovation disclosures. I just want to put that on record. So peer-reviewed articles is the number 20. And if I were to go then and slightly zoom on the projects themselves, the key milestones that we are looking at for this financial year, like I've said on number 8, we are looking at as a big item is to go out to the market with our multi-purpose reactor with an RFP, request for proposals, with a view of identifying a preferred bidder going forward. And the contracting approach that we are looking at here is a turnkey project with financing provided by the vendor. That becomes very important. Then on the front end fuel supply, the key milestones here are around firming up the feasibility studies that are related to some of these facilities for conversion, for enrichment, and for fuel fabrication. Fuel fabrication of multiple fuels for the research reactor we have, including the plates that are used to generate the isotopes. We call them the target plates. We're also looking at developing some fuel components for the Quebec type fuels so that we can be in that value chain. And number 3, we want to look at the PBMR type fuel, which is also called the triso fuel, being developed at NECSA. So we'll be looking at those and prioritizing along the year. And if we go to the SMR number 10, like I've said, we went out on an expression of interest for the demonstration reactor. We've issued the expression of interest, and there are some milestones towards identifying that preferred partner for the demo SMR. And for the others, it's the run-of-the-mill in terms of those. So in essence, that is the corporate plan. Then as we move on to the next slide, I would like Ms. Hawadi to take us through what would be then the budget implications for what we aim to achieve. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Hawadi. Maybe what we can do, we are in the same boardroom as Ms. Hawadi, so she can speak through my microphone. Over to you, Precious.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jabashe, and good morning to the Honorable Chairperson Kanyese, honorable members, and the NECSA delegation. So I'll be taking the committee through the budget that we have presented before us. So Chairperson and members, as we go through the budget, looking at the forecast, starting at the forecast for the year we have just come out of, we had forecast some losses for the FY 2025-26 financial year, which was mainly informed by the geopolitics that we have seen in the current environment. So I think we're aware of what has been happening geopolitically, which was an unprecedented phenomenon. One thing which is quite positive, though, I must say, in terms of this is that when we look at our actual performance, we have been able to claw back on the majority of the forecasted losses, and we're aiming to end as close as possible to break even to profitability. We are currently in the process of firming up and finalizing our performance and our results, also being in an audit period at this point in time. So we will come back at a point in time in terms of what the actual results are after the audit period. But I think that is quite positive that despite forecasting that double-digit loss, we are working as hard as possible to be able to firm up, mainly informed by the unprecedented conditions. Going forward, what we then see is that in our budget, if we look at that 28.65 form, what has informed that, if we look at the right-hand side, is it is a combination of the performance of all of the entities within the NECSA group. So we've got NECSA, which we envisage being slightly profitable. The delta from the previous financial year is that we do not envisage receiving dividends in this current financial year, as was the situation previously, due to the geopolitical situation and the influence thereof. When we look at the entity group, this is a combination essentially of the entities, NTP radioisotopes that the CEO has mentioned. We have NTP Logistics, which is the logistical arm of the group. Then we have AEC Amisham, which is a marketing entity, as well as Gamatech, which deals essentially with the NDT. So the combination of the performance of all of those four entities is what gives the 18.947. When we look at Pelchem, we are targeting to be at least break even, because we do understand that to be sustainable going forward, we need to at least break even at a minimum. And that is what gives the combination of the 28.654. Into the outer years, the slight decline is informed by the grant reduction that we have experienced within the group, and we'll speak to that in a bit of the outer slides. And thereafter, after being able to try and stabilize that situation, we do envisage going into moderate upward performance year on year. One thing which is quite positive on our side is, whereas there used to be the previous phenomenon of not being able to pay salaries, for the financial years that we have come out of and the financial year that we're going into, we will be able to pay our salaries and to meet our obligations as they become due. That has been a focus area in terms of stabilizing the organization. What was also mentioned in terms of the statement of financial position is that we are on an investment drive at the moment, and that is why it is important to be able to stabilize our results and to be able to show firm performance both in the current financial year as well as in the outer financial years. This is an imperative when we go and we speak to investors who are currently quite interested in engaging with us, especially having clarified the issues around governance and bringing a clean audit team. So that is quite a positive thing that we have experienced. So that is the importance and the strength of strengthening our statement of financial position. When it comes to our CapEx obligations, so we have a combination in terms of CapEx requirements, and that is both a combination of those that are funded as well as those that are unfunded. With those that are unfunded, those are the ones that we've also been approaching investors on to try and get funding for those investment imperatives. These are a combination of both from a maintenance perspective as well as from a growth perspective going forward. So while we do realize that we do have some cash pressures with expenditure and capex, we are managing those, as can be seen from the output of being able to meet our obligations as they become due and not having the issue in terms of not being able to pay salaries. When we look at our budget assumptions and what has informed that, a lot of the indicators have to do with the CPIs and the current rates, as well as the exchange rates. So we can understand that currently we're in a situation whereby we've seen a lot of fluctuations with the geopolitics. In terms of managing that fluctuation as it pertains to our budgets as well as going forward, what we do, and to ensure that we have an audit trail, we engage the bankers, and what they do is that they perform some actuarial numbering and modeling to ensure that we have the closest and best estimates in terms of where the rand and dollars are likely to end at the end of the financial year, which is an accepted audit methodology from the HSA. So currently we've been utilizing ABSA, Nedbank, and Rand Merchant. And what we also do is that while we have utilized the September 2025 statistics, we have also monitored what the numbers were in terms of the January updated numbers and the year-end ones. So we do also keep a monitoring, and we factor those into our forecast. Big input into our budget, especially as it pertains to NECSA SOC, has been in terms of the grant. So mentioned previously in the previous slide that one of the things that has also informed our moderate performance has been the reduction in the grant that we have seen over the MTF period. So the initial grant was an amount of grant cut was an amount of 293.173 over the MTF. So basically on a year-on-year basis, starting from 2024-25, we were receiving a grant cut of about 100 million year on year, which equated to a reduction of about 9.17, 9.24, 9.19. So we have been able to, and what we've tried to do is to try and balance this grant cut of the 293 within the expenditure and to make sure that we're able to at least maintain and be sustainable. Over and above the 293, we got communication in the last financial period that there was an additional 48.12 million grant cut being envisaged. So in total, with the two items, the grant cut is 341.393 over the MTF period. So this is also a big contributor in terms of the moderate performance that we present to the committee this morning. The last slide is just to show a pictorial in terms of what our income profile looks like and what our expenditure profile looks like. So we mentioned in the previous slide that we have received a grant cut. So we see that that is going downwards in terms of the grant cut. What we have tried to do from a strategy perspective and in terms of revenue diversification is we have tried to see how we can try and start diversifying our income. One of the things we have done is started to look at other grants. So these grants come into other spaces as it pertains, for instance, in the NSF environment, which is the skills space, where we have approached other partners to be able to see if we're able to get grants to supplement. And all of these grants, both the one above and the one below, are specific for funded mandates. And we are very particular in ensuring that we are sticking to the mandate for which we receive the grants for. Then we have the investment income, which is in terms of income from the various investments that we have tried to do, because what we try and do as well is to optimize our assets. So that is a moderate growth we have seen in that space. We spoke about the radioisotope business, where we look at medical, industrialization, and radiopharmaceuticals. And what we see there is a moderate growth in that environment. Then we look at the chemical space, which was also mentioned previously. We've also seen a moderate growth in that space, also affected by the geopolitics, but we are trying to see what we can do in terms of the diversification thereof. Then we have a leg that speaks to royalties. The CEO mentioned in the previous slide that in terms of our IP, we do try and see how we can work with partners, making sure that we are protecting our IP, but where there is an opportunity, we're able to gain some royalties in terms of leveraging that. We have some of the manufacturing and training. We were able to get a bit of income in terms of doing some training. In terms of the training environment, there is some work that is happening in terms of training both within our province and in some of the outer provinces. Then we have some lab services, which is quite a nice service that we have. And this also includes some work that happens in terms of the lab space, which we're also looking to see how we can expand upon that space. So from a revenue perspective, that is the profile of our revenue. Our expenses in the main relate to personnel expenses. That is the majority of the expense that we have. Thereafter followed by our nuclear reactor, which is the next big amount that we have in terms of expenditure. And finally, the last one that we then have are other nuts and bolts and small expenses. Thank you so much, and I'll hand back to the CEO.
Thanks, Ms. Awati. So as we move forward, and as in the same order that we run the business in that we need to also look at risk, the risks that are always looming for the business. So the first risk that we've identified, or maybe let me explain the rationale that we have on the right-hand side, our legend, in that extreme risks, which have got a rating of 25 to 20 to 25, is a risk that really could be problematic for our group in its entirety. And the scale slides down to the risks that we have managed to an insignificant level, which is risk less than a 5. So these risks are typically starting off with an inherent risk of between 20 and 25. They start off being extreme, with the view that at the end of the financial year, we finish with them at a level of residual risk much lower than the initial inherent risk. So typically we aim to be in the moderate, low, or insignificant area. But as we run the business, some risks tend to remain high, but we have active management and we have to maintain our finger on the pulse. So the first biggest risk that we've noted is us as a group failing to sustain and grow the net profit after tax And we've said this a couple of times that there are some geopolitics because we operate in the international sphere in terms of our products and services. And there is a big risk as the geopolitics evolve. And this is important for the financial sustainability for operations and especially growth. The second one is the unavailability of our neutrons through our Safari reactor. And the rationale for this is that to deliver on the key mandate and growth programs, as well as self-sustenance in light of geopolitics, we need to have this reactor available because it is one of the, I think, 5 reactors in the world that supply these commercial products. And we really need to ensure that as part of the international planning, we remain firm and square to what we've committed. Having Safari operational, thus not having neutrons available, is a bit catastrophic both for our business, for our country, as well as for the international domain that uses these products for healthcare purposes especially. The third one is the potential of the inadequate resilience to crisis or disaster. We, in the nuclear business, we've got an added perceived risk in that an event happening at a nuclear site, even if it were to happen at a non-nuclear site where it would receive less attention, on a nuclear site, this receives quite heightened attention. So what we are doing is all those things that are related to, it could be physical security, it could be natural disasters, it could be IT-related events. We're doing all that we can, and we're putting all the mitigations to ensure that those don't materialize. And if they've materialized, we have adequate resilience from that particular downtime. I must say that we've moved this risk in leaps and bounds to where we are. The fourth one is the loss of stakeholder confidence and public trust. As we've seen with the recent events, that it's easy to lose confidence and public trust. So it is very important that we have public acceptance for growth, which is a social license to operate as far as we see it. So very important for us that we move forward and ensure that, number one, we operate transparently, we communicate and demystify the nuclear business, as well as ensure that nuclear is very safe, which is why, as part of our environmental index that we spoke about earlier in the KPIs, we also even have the public dose element on it, in saying what kind of radiation does an ordinary person receive outside the fence, which is actually close to natural background radiation, actually sometimes lower than some areas that have got a natural background radiation that is quite elevated, like near Paarl. The Paarl Rock is very known for that. Then the next one is the failure to bring research work into fruition, which links to that item on the KPI of commercializing a product every year. We need to deliver on this as our key mandate, and it's important for our sustainability because this particular field thrives on innovation, and we really need to take innovation from pure research applications to commercializing and deriving profitability around that. The other one is the failure or delays in implementation of high impact projects. Those projects, growth projects that we spoke about, where we intend to implement 95% of the plans for each of the coming years, is a very important strategy. It's the essence of our strategy. And the biggest risk around them is primarily the funding related to them. Because number one, we'll be looking at on balance sheet, which is very limited, and multiple elements of off-balance sheet items in the form of getting partners, but there will be a point of government guarantees that will be needed before external investors can come into agreement with. In some areas, there won't be any government guarantees needed because those will be product driven. So for as long as we have the market, then the facility and the partnership can take on. So this is the biggest, by far, the funding for these programs. But I always say there is no shortage of money. All we need to show is good governance and viability of our projects to the market. As a matter of fact, the minister has led us into multiple initiatives where we have been paired up with investors as of yesterday. If I can say this, Subesh, we're in a meeting with an Afrexim bank, which promises to be one of those banks in the African continent that want to participate in African continental individual country and intertrade within the continent. So we are looking forward to those future engagements to ensure that we deliver on those projects. So really the investor confidence and the build-up is very important to mitigate that risk number 6. Other things relate to our regulatory constraints in that we don't feel that we've got a streamlined environmental authorization process, because we have to always abide, especially if it's nuclear facilities, by 2 regulators in the form of DFFE as well as the NNR. But we need to streamline those, and we're moving towards minimizing that potential risk. Then the other one always remains the issue of high performance culture and agility of the organizational culture to shift to a production and projects intensive growth strategy. So this is important because the human resources are very key in delivering on our mandate and strategy for long-term sustainability. When you move from an organization which we inherited 5 years ago that was on a downward slope in terms of performance and everything, it requires a different mindset to stabilize it, which is what we achieved in the last cycle, and even a much more different mindset to go into growth, because I always say the mindset of a project manager to deliver a project within 3 or 5 years is very different to an operator who will be operating a plant for 20 years. So we really need to get those right skills, proper skills, and convergence towards this high performance culture, depending on what facility people are working on. But high performance need to be at the center stage. So those are the key risks that we are managing right through. Then as we move into the other area, which I view as the important license to operate, is our stakeholders and the engagement thereof. Ours is really to continuously review this landscape to ensure that the material issues that are raised by the key stakeholders are attended to. You must understand their likes and dislikes, their preferences, etc., etc. So we really need to have constructive and mutually beneficial discussions. And if I move from the top of the cycle or the map, is that we've got the shareholder, government, departments, and parliament. So this particular meeting becomes very important to our operations, and that we need to understand what the public representatives who represent our people, because we are given money by the state for specific mandates. We need to be able to account to those mandates as well as grow the company through other commercial revenues. Employees become very important. Business and industry, very important, because we cannot do this alone. We really need to make sure that both suppliers and customers alike actually talk our language when they understand where they are at. The NGOs becomes very important, but in the nuclear space, we live in a space wherein you've got NGOs that are strategically opposed to the nuclear program in whichever form and shape. So ours with these NGOs is to ensure that we share facts, because we know that we can never change their orientation, but we need to share the facts and share them to the public at large. We've got multiple regulators, both locally and I think internationally. It's more of the guiding organizations, more the watchdogs. So those become very important as well. We are partnering a lot with scientific and academic research community, because the research nowadays cannot be done by a single entity. We need to collaborate as a fundamental aspect. So we need to understand the do's and the don'ts and the likes and the dislikes of these particular research institutions. Labor organizations become very important. We live in an ever-changing landscape of labor movements. We currently have 2 labor organizations on our side, and but you hear that with different alignments and orientations, there could be others being formed, but currently we have one recognized and the other one that is also has been around for a while. So we do understand, and we want to stay close to them to understand what they are, what it is that they want to hear. Suppliers, like I've said, very important. Media becomes one of the elements to ensure that we treat media with respect, provide the right information at the right time with the right quality, because it is very important that we position nuclear, especially in this current resurgence, at the right level. And that goes hand in hand with the international community, especially in the nuclear space. We need to be in sync with what the international community is doing. So we can't afford to be either behind or much ahead of them. Local communities are important. As a matter of fact, we do have a legislated framework of meeting our local communities on a quarterly basis. And we do integrate their issues that they raise, but generally there's been appreciation of NECSA playing open cards with them in terms of us accounting on our operations. But it does not stop the fact that the community wants more job opportunities. And we do believe that with the growth programs, there will be less of that concern as we will aim to employ as much as we can from the local communities. Investors and funders, I've spoken to that, as well as customers. So that's the landscape that we're operating in, and it is very important for us as a license to operate. Then, as I conclude, our strategy is focused on the 4 focus areas, which is financial and operational sustainability, research, development and innovation, growth projects, as well as talent excellence and skills development. That becomes now our fundamental anchors as we move forward. The high impact programs, which is one of the pillars, which is the growth projects, they are very integral to our growth and sustainability going forward. In the space, it's either you innovate or you die. It's as simple as all that. These projects under the programs are at different levels of maturity, and we require different types of support, including funding, which is part of the corporate plan. So that becomes a very critical aspect for us to succeed as an entity. So in the MTF period, the financial estimates are expected to improve marginally as business cases mature, partnerships and fundings are firmed up. So for us, we're in a space of growth, and we really need to position ourselves as that agile force, because the growth phase is always the most dynamic of the phases. With that, I will hand back to the board chairperson. Back to you, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Louisa. I would just add a couple of things to your comments. I think it's important for the committee to recognize that we're in the early stages of potentially some very large programs. The expression of interest for the small modular reactor is clearly one of them. The front end of the fuel cycle is another. We're doing work on the potential for a large commercial-based fluorochemical plant as a partner to somebody else. And I mention it only because most of these are not included. Some of the early work is included in these financials, but the major impact is not included because we don't know what they're going to be. So there may well be some revisions of this, hopefully all positive, over the next 2 or 3 years as those projects hopefully move closer to operation or to implementation. Clearly, the MPR is in there because that has been approved and funded by Treasury. In terms of geopolitics, I wish to just emphasize that is an issue which is this last year affected us in one case very nearly very badly, in the sense that 50% of our income comes essentially from our radiopharmaceuticals, which are essentially 95% foreign currency. That is an entirely foreign activity. We fly radiopharmaceuticals out of our Tambo almost every day, and as such, clearly that is affected by geopolitics, and we've had some confusion over US tariffs, for example, this last year. The other example that is hitting us and has hit us, which very nearly became a major problem to us, was in fact our fuel supply for Safari. That fuel supply comes from the uranium itself, historically came from the USA, and because of political issues in terms of our agreement with the USA, that was put on hold by the USA for some period, and we literally eventually resolved the issue, but it was only resolved literally with a few weeks to spare. for us to be in a situation where if we hadn't had the resolution, we'd ended up with Safari being unable to operate because of lack of fuel. So I just put the comment that we are very forward-focused, both politically and commercially, and therefore some of the present, and that's what some of the reasons why you'll see our accounts are not as good this year as they were last year. For that, we are there've been large issues involved in that. With that, I'll pass back to the portfolio chair for any questions, and hopefully we can resolve any of the issues that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an extensive and comprehensive presentation. I will request members who have questions to please raise their hands. We do know, well, as you raise your hands, I'll just narrate to the entity that the way that we do it is we give each member 10 minutes to ask questions and get responses. Once they've exhausted their 10 minutes or they are done with asking questions, then we go on to the next member. So in that 10 minutes, it includes the responses that they would get on the questions that they ask. So what we prefer is the member asks the question and they get a direct response on the question, then they move on to the next question. So can you also please assist us on the side of the entity that please keep your responses direct and brief so that it does not eat on the time of the member for any other question that they would like to have. So we are then going to take the hands. We are going to take Honorable Paulson first, then go on to Honorable Nkosi, and then go on to Honorable Meleham, and go on to Honorable Dreng. In that order, and also Honorable Vapti. So I will ask my questions in the end. Yes, you may proceed, Honorable Paulson.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson, colleagues. Good morning to the NECSA officials, and thank you very much for the presentation. Chairperson, my first question is that the presentation forecasts a net loss of 48.18 million for 2026, but says that there will be a profit of 28.65 million in 2027. So given that government grants are decreasing by another 5% and overall expenses are rising, what are the specific non-speculative revenue streams or efficiency gains that will give us the 76 million rand swing in a single year? Thank you very much. It's my first question.
Thank you for the question, Honourable Paulson. Can I ask the CEO to field that question? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Honourable Paulson, for the question. So effectively, the amount of negative 43 million is as what we projected at the end of Q3, which was the end of December last year, because that's when we need to submit the corporate plan in February, so we base it on reality. However, what we have done in Q4, we've actually clawed back on some of what was going to be perceived as losses, and the CFO is on record saying that we will definitely be positive, profitable in this financial year, and we are looking at ensuring that we maintain the profitable trajectory over the years. And our view is that we foresee that we will be, I think the CFO did say, break even to double-digit losses, double-digit profit. And it is important that the swing that we will see then will be a much smaller swing to the 28 million in the year that we are starting now. So the grants that are declining are still a big concern for us because they continue to rise over the years. But most importantly, we are looking at multiple opportunities. First opportunity is adding more commercial revenue by diversifying on our revenue streams. The other one is actually to go aggressively, we've seen a bigger increase in terms of our facility that we have for manufacturing components in the form of tanks, pipes, and heat exchangers. That area has got a huge potential for growth. So that's the revenue side. The other part is the part on losses, on expenses. The expenses we are managing by optimizing our workforce. We've started off an initiative that was called rationalization in the last strategy, but now we're going into business efficiency and optimization as we move forward. So what I wanted to state is that on record is that we foresee being profitable by the end of the financial year when the results are audited in the next couple of months, making the swing much smaller. I hope that has answered the question.
If I may just add to that, this last year was, we had two very difficult issues on each of our subsidiaries. You can see, and certainly in NTP, that went into projected loss. And that was because we had one of our key customers was in a commercial arrangement, moved to their commercial arrangement. We believe we can resolve that issue and recover the NTP situation. And similarly with Pelchem, our big profit maker was xenon difluoride. As with all things, the Chinese decided our margins were too big, so they came into that market. So both those issues we're aware of. It's unfortunately occurred in the same year, but they basically, we believe that they will be resolved in the coming year, and therefore we will get back to the previous. Bearing in mind that last year we had 180 million rand profit, so this year is particularly weak. But we believe it's very, very, very specific reasons on both the Pelchem and the NTP side. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the response. And so radioisotopes account for 56% of the group's of NECSA's income, and you have an extreme risk of Safari 1 unavailability. And that, of course, presents a real risk to the organization's existence. And with the multi-purpose reactor still in build phase or in planning, what is a specific contingency plan for revenue replacement should Safari 1 suffer a catastrophic failure before the new reactor is operational? Thank you.
I'm going to pass that again to the CEO, but my only comment is that we've been operating Safari. I'll call it's probably the best operating research reactor in terms of available days online in the world, but if we were to lose that, it would be a major challenge. So I'll ask the CEO to respond to that question.
Thank you, Chair. You've stolen words out of my mouth. So Safari is touted to be one of the best operated research reactors that produce isotopes in the world. So that's a very good point, which talks to our aging management program, which has been implemented very well by our operating and maintenance crew at NECSA in partnership with NTP. But I think most importantly, the risk that we are raising is a real risk, which is why we've embarked on the multi-purpose reactor development and construction thereof, with the view of having it commercial in the period before 2035. What becomes very important to state is that while there is an inherent risk of operating Safari, like the chairperson mentioned, in terms of getting fuel from the international community, we are managing that actively. But the biggest risk had been that the license for the Safari reactor currently, the NNR had imposed us with an end of life in 2030. And that was just the license on the books. Now we are on our way to do work guided by the International Atomic Energy Agency in the form of long-term operations, the LTO, to extend the life of Safari beyond 2030. With the work that has been done from a scientific and an engineering level, we foresee that we can still be able to operate this reactor for a good decade and more beyond 2030. That's the high-level work, but we still need to submit the work to our regulator, and they must review it accordingly in the next 2 or 3 years or so. We also take the advantage of the work that was done by Quebec in the life extension of their reactors, that our regulator now has rhythm and appropriate approach to looking at the life extension projects. So that's the second item on Safari not being available. Catastrophically, I think if we look at the Safari reactor, generally, it's less intense compared to the power reactors because it operates at a much lower pressure and at much lower temperatures compared to those power reactors. So we've looked at all the contingencies and also the aging management program, which looks at components and equipment that needs to be replaced, the maintenance programs, both at a predictive and a corrective aspect. Those are very much well on point. So the risk remains, however, it is mitigated by so many of those contingencies that I've mentioned. Thanks, Chair.
Again, if I can just add, you're completely correct, Honourable Paulson. If somebody came in tomorrow morning and said, we cannot operate Safari ever again, there's almost no contingency we'd have to solve that problem. It would be a catastrophe for us. We believe the way we're managing it now makes that extremely unlikely. But it's a risk we run. It is basically a large part of our current business. As we move forward, clearly these projects will expand beyond that business and therefore to become less dominant in our industry, hopefully. But at the moment, it is the bedrock of our balance sheet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nichols, Mr. Tayabashi, for your response. We'll keep our fingers crossed that nothing untoward happens to Safari 1. So in addition to that, over the last 3 years, you faced 341 million rand in budget cuts in total. So with your small modular reactor development, which is capital intensive and high impact, and then in addition to that, and you just mentioned it, front-end fuel supply, how are you going to finance this high impact program and the purchasing of front-end fuel supply when you face that 341 million rand in budget cuts over the past 3 years? Thank you.
I'm going to ask you, if I may, in a specific way, if we talk about the request for the expression of interest for a partner, we've asked them to consider how they would help fund this. And so each one of these projects has a very specific funding profile. It's going to be a challenge. That's one of our biggest challenges going forward. But we believe that there are ways in which we can use market forces. I'll give you an example as we speak. In terms of the enrichment program, there is a proposed joint venture which we're exploring with ASPI International, which is I'm not quite sure which country it's based in. I think it's which is looking to build an enrichment plant on our site in conjunction with ourselves. They will be funding that, and that would then resolve that side of it. So each one of these areas has a multiplicity. An example is in terms of the small modular reactor, we expect it to actually synchronize into the grid, and as well as doing molten heat exchangers, it'll also be doing electric power, and we're looking at potentially a developmental PPA with the grid would help provide the financing for that project. So each one has a different thing. We recognize that problem. We can't give you an easy answer because each of those projects will have its own way forward. The early research and development work we are doing in-house with our own research funds. So we're doing some of the work has been done in-house on our funds and is in our budget. But the big projects are going to require us to have a relationship with almost certainly an external party to provide them the financing regime for those. We live with the budget cut. It happened. We would love it back, but it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Time is up. With
No,
that,
space for one last question. No, it's fine. Chairperson, thank you very much.
Time was up during the beginning of the response. So, honorable members, I just have a small emergency to attend to. I'm going to request Honorable Ngosi to continue taking the remaining questions, and I will join back probably before the meeting ends. But next in line would have been Ngosi. Now that I've requested this of him, perhaps we can go on to Honorable Milham.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to NECSA for the presentation. My first question is, on your slide with regard to the risks, I think it was the third last slide, there is no indication of the level of each of those risks. You've got a table that shows the severity of the risk down the side, but you haven't indicated for each risk what the severity is. Can you give us an indication of that, please?
I will pass that to the CEO.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Quite correctly, we did not indicate all of them, Chairperson and Honorable Malcolm. They are at that extreme level in terms of the inherent risk, which is between 20 and 25. So they are red. But our view is to mitigate them as we move along the year.
Okay, well, with that in mind, then you've classified failing to grow net profit after taxes as an extreme rating. And your own budget shows profits declining by over 80% from last year's 176 million to next year's 28 million. So why shouldn't we view your growth strategy as being in immediate financial distress?
Right. If I can just, Chairperson, if I can hand it over.
Yes, sorry, I'll go on, Louisa.
Okay, over to you, Precious.
Thank you, Honorable Madam, for the question. So the reason why the outer years, if we look at them having declined in terms of the mitigation and those being effective, is because we have actually been able to allocate specific areas of where we envisage that revenue to come from, which acts as a mitigant in terms of our risk strategy. So if we look at the forecast was mainly informed by the sudden occurrence of the geopolitics. What we have started doing in the outer years is we have started mitigating that. There are engagements taking place in terms of how we're going to diversify our markets. And we've also been able to start firming up in terms of some of the contracts as well. So we look at the outer years where we have envisaged break even for the respective entities and being able to identify to specific contracts and areas where that would come from. We do envisage that would bring that risk down significantly. Thank you.
If I may just add on that one. So we also looked at our ratios in the form of liquidity and solvency. We are still looking good on those ratios with the current figures that we are showing. But we do hope that as we move forward with opening of the new markets, I'll make an example. There is a market that has historically not been looked at, which is India, because they are not signatories to the non-proliferation treaty, but isotopes have got nothing to do with proliferation of material for other purposes. We are actively engaging our shareholder to ensure that we get into that market, where it's a big market that we cannot ignore. So we are definitely not in financial distress in this and the outer years. However, the risk remains that we might not be able to pull those big profits that we've seen in the last 3 years. Chair, I don't know if I add anything.
Yeah, may I add another one to that? Honourable Milam, we have actually been we're now putting money into the leading edge of these projects, which is clearly an expense to us. So essentially what you're seeing is we have built up a situation where we're making profits, and I'm for the moment going to leave last year as an anomaly because of the problems we had with our isotope market. But essentially what's now happened is we've now been able to start putting research money into these projects and development money into these projects, into the front end of the fuel cycle. So we're doing the early part of that work already, which is one of the reasons why the apparent profit is going down.
Which then leads me to my next question, which is your new strategy requires 80 billion rand in investment. Your profits are dropping to 23 million rand, and DE is cutting grants by 340 odd million rand. So what investors are lined up? Have any of them signed contracts or term sheets or anything like that to bridge that capital gap? And if so, who?
Okay. That investment amount includes, for example, the small modular reactor, or the biggest single lump in there. And that clearly will be a function of what the expression of interest come back as, because we've explicitly asked them for funding arrangements out of their proposals, for example. So yes, clearly, as I said earlier, the success, we have not factored into this the success of these significant projects. We believe that they are fundable in various ways, but at the moment the impact of those projects, all those strategic projects, has been to increase our cost base, which is where the profit reduction has gone on in terms of that situation. But yes, clearly there's going to be some strong debating about how we raise this money. Present view is that each one is in its own way credible, but not committed.
Okay,
and we haven't got particular banks, and I'd leave it at that and pretend otherwise. I'd be being naive.
Okay, so what you're saying is that 80 billion rands worth of investment is fundable but unfunded at this time. Did I read you correctly?
That's how I would phrase that, yes.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the front-end fuel cycle. Does the government intend to lift the moratorium on uranium enrichment? And what budget allocation have you put in place for the high security facilities required for this?
I'm going to pass that across to CEO, but at the moment I don't know of an official moratorium on uranium enrichment in this country. I don't know of a cabinet decision or a policy decision that says we should not. It hasn't been done, but there is no policy against it, to my knowledge, and it is explicitly in our and we are doing work in that field at the moment. In terms of the high security area around it, we are a national key point, and we will take appropriate security measures as required for the facilities we build going forward. That I'll pass across to the CEO.
Thanks, Chair. Fully aligned with you. The government talks about the security of supply as it pertains to the nuclear fuel, and it talks to the entire value chain. I'm not aware of any moratorium, and as such, we're moving forward with that. The part of the enrichment part obviously will be for conventional use below 20% or up to 20% enrichment. It's still really at a research phase that we are looking at. And there is no specific budget amount at this point in time, but the overall estimate for the front-end fuel, which talks to conversion, enrichment, and some element of fuel fabrication, is in the order of 21 billion rands as part of that 80 billion rands strategy. But like I've said, some of these figures are still at a pre-feasibility stage, which means they might either go down or go up. So we're going to be refining these numbers. So 80 billion is not cast in stone because of the unfirm nature of the stages of the different projects. Some of them pre-feasibility, some of them feasibility, some of them being in implementation phase.
Thank you. I'm hearing a lot of wish list stuff here.
Oh.
So yeah. Okay. Let's move on. On the MPR, on your corporate plan targets over 3 years slide, on line 8, you've got MPR project in build phase, and then annual plans, and your target is 95%, 95%, 95%, and it's similar for other issues down there, other targets under your growth programs sector. Can you explain the progress that we would be at the end of each financial year? Like, we will have achieved 10% of the progress to the completion of the project by end of FY 26-27, 20% by end of FY 27-28, etc. I'm just trying to get an idea of how we are progressing rather than looking at an annual target.
I'll pass that to you, Louis. So just as a preemptive, we will be issuing an RFP as when we get the correct approvals, and they're apparently close to being given to us. The RFP is being prepared. And the outcome will be in the first financial year, largely be getting that RFP out and the responses and the selected supplier proposed for approval.
Thanks, Chair. That's correct. So for this year, really, the focus is issuing the RFP and getting the preferred bidder identified. And then the following year, we'll be finalizing the design of the actual facility as well as its associated infrastructure. And then in the outer year, in the third year, it is the commencement of construction. With the view of completing the construction process by around 2032. That's the current plan. So what we'll do going forward, instead of, like I've said in my presentation, Honorable Milam, is that I noticed that it's a composite index of 95% of the plans for the year. Going forward, we'll definitely make sure that we give those key milestones for each of those projects.
I think that's important. Thank you very much. Okay, so my last question, and then I have a comment to conclude with. My last question is related to the SMRs. Now, you've prioritized SMRs for power generation and other uses. I heard what you were saying about other uses as well. But has the NNR received a formal license application, a site license application for a demo SMR, or is this still purely in a conceptual research phase?
I'll take that one, Louisa. At this stage, we haven't got we've gone out for an expression of interest of a potential company, and we don't prejudge it. It's been totally open for a reactor, which is either a high temperature reactor, like similar vaguely to the PBMR was, or a water cooled reactor, because there's two technologies that we understand and they're in the national policy. We haven't applied to the regulator for any application because we have yet to actually determine what technology and who the supplier would be and what the design would be. And that is a function of what expressions of interest we receive. And to go with that is a combination of how mature is the design being proposed, how is the intellectual property being discussed, how is the financing being discussed, and so on. It is premature yet to be going out for a nuclear siting license with the NNR. We wouldn't know what to do with it if we got it. We wouldn't know what to put on the form. It'll depend on which of the potential suppliers is selected, and their design and the maturity of their design. So it's too early in the process to be doing that. We need to identify a partner who we then take through an open process, who we then take to our shareholder ministry and to Ministry of Finance and get approval, whatever arrangement we end up proposing to do with them. That's the best answer I can give you.
Okay, no problem. So,
thank you.
Time is up, Mr. Milan.
Time has come to an end, Honorable Milan. We will give you some time maybe for follow-up later. Thank you very much. We will go to the next honorable member who will be also posing their comments and questions. Honorable Wayne Thring.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me firstly appreciate the presentation and go straight into my questions. I suppose the first question is, firstly, it's preceded by a comment. Often I've said in different places that I've spoken that one's external reach is only as great as your internal capacity. I think former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan also indicated that one of the problems with Africa is a problem of governance, and if Africa can ensure that, well, I suppose it doesn't apply to Africa alone, but to every other nation and every other continent and country. But if one can ensure that we have good governance, to a large extent, it solves problems. So there's, external reach, internal capacity, and then governance. Now, this particular comment leads me then to the question of the challenges that NECSA experienced with the board. So what are those particular challenges that have been experienced with the previous board? What contribution have these challenges had on the deficit of some 40 odd million? And are you confident, excuse me, that the new board is able to steer the ship into calmer territory?
I'll take that one clearly. I don't think you asked about the governance of the organization, and I will just quote the clean audit, which indicates that we have a grasp on our governance. And as I said at the time, I don't want to go back to that whole saga. The issues with the governance issues last year tended to apply upon essentially issues inside the board, and with the immediate executives reporting to the board. I do not believe they had any impact on last year's results. I know of no situation where the board, in terms of the operation of the company, was not acting correctly. In terms of the new board, my view is they seem an extremely good board. I must admit, I'm the only person who came from the last board, but I have had no. I think they're a very good mix of skills and experience, and I'm very comfortable with that board, the new board we have. That's the best answer I can give you, honorable thing.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think my next two questions have been covered. The one on the budget deficit by Honorable Paulson, and the other on the slide which shows risks but didn't show the scale of those particular risks, that was also covered by Honorable Milam. And so perhaps my next question then, Chair, is how does NECSA intend to balance its commercial objectives with the public mandate that it has, particularly in relation to nuclear safety and energy security, research capacity, as well as the long-term sustainability of strategic national nuclear capabilities in the light of the geopolitical tensions and challenges that you have elucidated on in the presentation?
I think that the key issue is the way we will maintain skills and abilities is by doing significant projects. And that the move into the front end of the fuel cycle, and initially that was aimed when we first started at looking primarily at providing our own fuel and our own uranium for Safari, to avoid the problem we had last year, which was close to being a challenge. So I think that the commercial activities are all aimed at nuclear science activities. They're all related to our core industry. And my reading is that if we could get these going, as we get these going, we're going to find that we have more security. The front end of the fuel cycle is clearly an important issue, and it is of note. There was a comment made by Honorable Milam. In the IRP 2025, it explicitly talks about 10 gigawatts and the justification for 10 gigawatts of nuclear. And that is largely driven about how much consumption do we need to justify a fully commercial domestic nuclear front-end fuel supply. And that about 10 gigawatts, you would do that. But the problem at the old AEC, if you go the old days, was they had an enrichment plant and they had a fabrication plant, but there's not enough demand for it to make it commercially viable. So I think that what we're doing now is aimed exactly at what you're talking about. And I think that we're aiming very strongly to achieve that aim. And at the lowest level, we're looking to make sure Safari has a fuel supply and enriched uranium potentially domestically. We believe we can do that on a commercial basis, and then expand that as we get a bigger nuclear program in the country. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. Chair, I think that is my questions, and so it's short because my other two questions have been covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Thring. The honorable member that is up next is Honorable Edwin Bapti. You can come in, Honorable Bapti.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to NECSA. Chair, I'll start off with a simple one, and that is the year-end financial statements, which are not yet completed. If we could have an indication as when the year-ends will be done and the audit will be completed.
I will pass that to the CFO.
Thank you, Honourable Member Bapti. So we've actually started with the audit. We started with an early audit on the 2nd of March 2026. We will be submitting on time. So by the 29th, ahead of schedule on the 31st, we will have the final audited financial statements completed. So HSA is currently already on site and have started with the preliminary work.
And the final
Thank
audit
you.
will be completed end of July.
Ahead of the 31st of July timeline. Thank you.
Right. My next question, I'm looking at slide number 9, and that is the audit outcomes. And we see that Gamatech has declined and Alchem has stayed the same. What are the basic reasons behind that? And will it improve in this current year?
Again, I'll pass that to the CFO.
Thank you, Honourable Bapti. So in terms of Palchem and Gamatech, so actually with Palchem, if we start with Palchem, we're actually quite near and quite close to a clean audit. There was one matter in terms of opening balance that made Palchem also not get a clean audit. With Gamatech, what the issue was is that there was a matter in terms of irregular expenditure that made Gamatech decline from the targeted clean at the time to a qualification. What we're doing about those two entities, so as part of the early audit that I mentioned, we started on the 2nd of March, HSA has been on site. They have been on site to audit specifically for Gamatech, the irregular expenditure. So they have looked at that in terms of the prior financial year to satisfy themselves around the completeness of the regular expenditure list. And with that, they are now starting to do their actual on-site testing. The intention being that they complete that testing before we submit the audited financial statements for auditing on the 31st of May. So we have ensured that we have covered that aspect for Gamatech in terms of the qualification. And then in terms of Palchem, what we are doing with that is that in terms of the opening balance in the previous financial year, we've introduced an additional layer of control into that aspect to make sure that we are not going to be in the same situation going forward. But in Gamatech's situation, it was an aspect in terms of disclosure of irregular expenditure, which we have resolved and HSA is currently auditing.
Thank you. I'm going to go then to slide number 16, and I'm going to look at the skills development KPI, capacity building, which is given as a percentage of revenue growth. Has there been consideration of an indicator that deals with headcount as opposed to percentage of revenue growth?
I will pass that to the CEO.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Honourable Bapti. So the issue of the head count, currently NECSA is about 1,600 people. We anticipate NECSA growing in line with the projects that we are implementing. So the issue of head count for us, while it needs to be maintained at an optimal level, we do not want to put a measure on it other than putting two primary measures related to that, which are the transformation index that we operate towards, as well as the skills development that we want a competent workforce that is optimally designed for the organization. Thanks.
Okay, and then I've just got two final ones, but I don't want to go over what has been answered already. I think the question on risks and the level of risk has been answered, so I'm going to leave that one. But I do want to come back to front-end fuel supply. Just looking at the growth plans, the SMR, NPR, Safari, LTO, Kuberg, and of course RRP Newbuild. It appears to me, given the geopolitics and the instability with markets and suppliers, that front-end fuel supplies is an apex priority for our development going forward. And if you could just comment on that, it just appears that if we don't have local capacity to provide our own fuel, we make ourselves extremely vulnerable, and that could in fact have huge consequences for our entire nuclear industry going forward.
I think that's a very appropriate response. it's just of interest that we used to manufacture the fuel for Safari on site. And some years ago, for commercial reasons, we moved the manufacturing to a French company, which is almost a world supplier of these things. And of course, that's one of the things that's been hurting us, nearly hurt us last year with the Safari supply. So we're now going back to that. And I think there has been a history in this country of making purely commercial-based decisions without thinking strategic supply or security of supply and other things. So yes, we're moving into that area. It is clearly we are moving towards it both technologically and administratively in terms of being able to move into the front end of the fuel supply. And we'll go as fast as we are funded to go. That's not a hint for more money, just that's the reality of life. But we believe that we will be getting there over the next few years. And the first target we have in terms of the front end of the fuel supply, the two front ends is to look towards a technological discussion of how we get the uranium enrichment for Safari, and secondly, how we do the fuel fabrication back on site for Safari. And they're both going forward inside the constraints of NECSA's finances, which is not really holding them back. They're going at a reasonable speed. Thank you.
Thank you. That's me done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bapti. I do not see any other hand. I also had some few questions that I prepared before Chair requested that I take over the meeting. I will just go straight to the questions that I have. I just want to check with NECSA, what are the main elements of the new board's new strategy for the next 5 years? And does it build on the current successes of NECSA? Can you please provide us with the details and not the clues from the strategic framework?
I'm going to pass that across to the CEO. My general comment is, yes, we're building on the last 5 years. It took us 5 years to move from an organization which, as the CFO was mentioning, we struggled on some months to pay salaries. We never didn't pay salaries, but it was close to a point now where we have got the company into a reasonable state to be able to talk about major projects and growth moving forward. The last 5 years has been to get the company back into a state where we can talk about those things. So it's absolutely built on that, but I'll pass the question across to the CEO for more detail.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very much aligned to your perspective. And I think this slide, as we put it back on, does demonstrate the dovetailing of the previous strategy to the current strategy, wherein you'll see that on the house, there are elements of finance which are still fused into the new strategy on financial sustainability. There are elements of operational sustainability that are shown in the previous strategy, and they are here. Research and innovation on both strategies, but taking a different turn in that the new strategy now focuses on more commercializing our research outputs, obviously still having that inherent or fundamental research elements. The biggest difference between the previous strategy and this one is the growth projects, because while we must have had 2 of those in the previous strategy, now we've grown it into 5+1, which is on skills and development. So there are some similarities, but even though where there are similarities, there is a step change moving forward. And then we've introduced new items. So I don't know if it answers you, Honorable, on that one, Honorable Ngosi.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, CEO. Yes, it does. The next question is, can you provide us with the development of nuclear medicine under NECSA and the progress made in marketing medical isotopes?
Back to you, Louis, sir.
Yes, I would actually like to ask the person representing NTP here. I think it's Jackson Salome. Jackson, if you're able to unmute, you can just come with more details on that. In the absence of Jackson being able to answer, So effectively what we have is that, maybe let me start historically about 5 years ago. We had a moly and an isotope production that was merely targeted for the US market. About, I think 60 to 70% was being delivered to the US. We saw that as a risk in terms of having one product and one market focused on, and we intended to diversify. So the work that NTP has been doing is to diversify. We've increased our footprint in the European market. We've also moved into the Asian market. We've increased our footprint there. And I think one market that remains still as an open item that we are discussing with the department is India, which is one of the biggest items, the biggest markets in that area. So our marketing team is afoot and on the ground to ensure that we diversify. And I don't want to ignore the African continent because that's also a growing market. However, it is currently limited by the unavailability of equipment that is used in hospitals. But we continue to have our footprint there. We are in the countries that are using nuclear medicine, and our teams are well known, and our marketing team is on the ground in those particular countries. So we have a very clear strategy going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Loiso, I think you should discuss Numeri, which clearly is an issue we've been heavily involved with.
Perfect. No, thanks, Chair. So Numeri is a nuclear medicine research institution. It's a big facility just outside of Steve Biko Academic. This is a facility that before it was constructed was actually incubated here in NECSA, in some of our structures here. It's really meant to assist with those preclinical trials as it pertains to nuclear medicine and clinical trials. With that being the case, and Numeri being one of the internationally recognized institutions, then Numeri becomes a marketing element indirectly for NECSA because all their isotopes come from NECSA, those that we manufacture. They would supplement those with others that we currently don't have. But Numeri has really positioned itself at a global stage, and in line with that, they have pulled us along to be part of that strategy. So both in the African and I think the IAEA has identified Numeri as one of the key regional centers for use of nuclear medicine. And we are right behind them to ensure that we provide those much needed isotopes. Thanks. Jackson, I don't know if you wanted to add something on top of that. I see your hand is up finally.
Yes, thanks through you, Chair. I wanted to also add in terms of diversification, we've seen that the nuclear medicine industry is moving more to therapy. Initially, Moly-99 and iodine were used mainly for diagnosis of cancer and related diseases. But the world has taken strides towards therapy. One isotope, for example, that has been added to the NTP stable is lutetium-177. It's used for therapy. It's used quite extensively in South Africa as well for treatment of prostate cancer as well as cancer of the neuroendocrine. Then in terms of technology diversification, one of NTP's second largest product, iodine-131. So one of the high impact projects that the CEO mentioned earlier is activation iodine-131. So it's a technology that will be a different technology. So we diversify the technology of producing iodine-131. What that's going to do, it's going to increase our capacity first and foremost, and therefore then improve our chances of competing. Add volumes to our existing fission-based iodine-131. So part of our strategy is also to go into other therapeutic isotopes such as actinium-225 and terbium-161. And we've already engaged partners. But all these things will then follow the right channels, governance processes, be taken through our boards, and then they are part of the NTP strategy at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackson. So effectively, the market diversification as well as product diversification are at the center of our strategy. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Louis. So I was going to comment. I have my unhappiness with this is that we haven't got radiation medicine rolled out in South Africa enough. for our own people. All this is focused on where we can raise revenue, because that's one of our mandates, to make sure we cover our costs. And it worries me that it may sound good that 95% plus of our sales of radiopharmaceuticals are exports, but it worries me we aren't able to do enough locally because the health service hasn't got the facilities to do it. So it's not really our commercial discussion, but socioeconomically, we should be trying to get more radio medicine into the South African health system. Sorry, that was just a little moan from me about the health system.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to NECSA. I see there's a hand of Letabo James Hlatrayo. I don't know if committee secretary or the entity knows who is Letabo James Hlatrayo.
I don't know the gentleman, Chair.
You CEO, Chair of NECSA. Do you know Letabo James?
Chair, I'm not aware of James.
Okay, committee secretary, I think you can deal with that. I don't know if everyone is able maybe to be part other than just to watch and of the meeting, but it's okay. I'm just I hope secretary you are also timing me. I have just one more question to NECSA. Given that the leading countries have declared nuclear and gas power generation as part of the green energy solutions, I just want to check with NECSA, how is the progress so far in terms of the power generation research?
I think that under the IRP, but also logically, there were two approaches we can take to new nuclear development in this country. One is to consider large reactors, such as Coburg type reactors, and that is the process that Eskom is going through procurement process or working towards a procurement process in line with the IRP 2025, and that will be procured on the open market. So local development will consist of supporting that manufacture in the same way as Coburg had local content included, and NECSA will see itself very much trying to be a supplier to that procurement, given our ability to build nuclear grade vessels. The other one is a small modular reactor, and that is the one you asked what progress. We've gone out for an expression of interest. We hope to get, we will get the replies are required by the 29th of May. And then we will see who is interested in getting involved in our market. We have had discussions with Eskom, and there is I'll say an intent that if we can get a good partner, and if we can move forward with the development of the COM machine, that will be a lead to install on the existing coal fleet to do a slightly better job of just transitions than happened with Komati. So the idea of building new reactors, small reactors on the existing coal stations is where Eskom is going. They've issued an EIA. They're starting an EIA process on 13 sites. And the aim will be that hopefully if we can get an appropriate technology and partner, we could be in a situation that would be able to offer a close to mature machine to Eskom in about 48 months time for them to contract for the going onto those sites. So that's the two things happening here. I think it's as much as anyone we could logically do as a country. I will just have to make the slightly amusing comment that small modular reactors are now very fashionable, but it's interesting that when the PBMR was first started in this country, there was no such thing as a small modular reactor. Everything was a big reactor. And it was the South African project which changed the world's views.
Your time is up, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, the time is up. Are there any members maybe that have any other follow-up questions? This is the time maybe that you can get one or two. Any comments on the presentation? This is for members. I see there's Honorable Somba. Is there any other name? Okay, there is Honorable Milan. Let me just start with Honorable Masiu. Honorable Masiu, you can come in. Honorable Somba Masiu.
Sorry, Chair. My gadgets are playing with me today. May I get in also? Chair.
Yes, you can proceed. Yes, you can proceed.
Okay. My question will be, let me also welcome the presentation done by NECSA. I've got only two questions, Chair. What are the main elements of the new board, new strategy for the next 5 years? And does it build on the current successes of NECSA? Please provide us with the details and not clue from the strategic framework. The second one will be, what is the aim and the benefit of the front-end fuel cycle, and how does NECSA intend to monetize the program? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Somba Masiu. NECSA, you can come in.
Thank you. In terms of the new board, I don't want to go into names, but we have the new board has got a better technical background. There were two, three of us who have a good technical background in the industry. We have got two very good CAs on the board. We have got a specialist in IT, and we've got Dr. Matweta, who is actually very good in the HR side of things. So it's a very nicely balanced board, to answer that question. And in such, it builds on the previous thing. That's all I can say to that. In terms of the front end, the fuel cycle, the front end of the fuel cycle is the process of creating nuclear fuel to go into a reactor of some type. And there were different processes in that. There was basically the mining, which we have never been involved with and don't see ourselves getting involved in any sense. There is the conversion, which is converting the uranium yellowcake into uranium hexafluoride, which is a gas. We see the potential for getting into that. We used to have a plant that does that. It is a reasonably straightforward commercial process. And again, we don't know. Then there is enrichment, which is enriching the uranium from the 0.7% of natural uranium up to nominally 5% for current generation power reactors, and maybe up to 20% or 20% for Safari, for example. And then there's fabricating the actual fuel after that. So those are the three elements to it. We are investigating. We have done historically, we've done all of those on the NECSA site. We have the technology for that, and we're working at seeing how is the best way to bring that forward to a commercial process. And clearly that is a question that Honourable Milam was raising about the funding, and the question revolves around how much do we end up with 100% national control, which therefore implies 100% national funding in some way, and to what extent do we end up with foreign or external partners involved in those processes. The technology development is ongoing at NECSA, and also this is an area which hopefully will yield significant financial results as well, because it then becomes a player in the world nuclear fuel supply market potentially. I hope that answers your question. I hope that was what you're looking for. Thank you.
Honorable Sompa Masiu, are you sorted?
No, I'm okay, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Kevin Malem, you can come in.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of follow-up questions. The first one relates to, on your slide, I'm not sure what slide number it is. It's the group financial plan slide. On the right-hand side, you've got group capex in millions, and for FY27, you've got 63 million NECSA unfunded capex. Could we get a breakdown of what that capex is, please?
Yeah, I think the CFO will take that.
Yeah, I was going to pass that to CFO. I think the slide you're talking about is slide 19 on my list. Oh, yes, 19.
We'll project that as the CFO talks through it.
Thank you, Honourable Madam. So in terms of the CapEx unfunded, which is unfunded, this is what is not specifically funded, like from the NPR budget or the other specific budgets. So it's essentially coming through from our budget. So what that would be is in terms of, for instance, IT, CapEx in terms of the IT work. It would also be CapEx, which is in terms of the plant and work that is actually on site. So the reason why we say it is unfunded is because it is not externally funded, like for instance from the NPR or special designated funding, but it actually comes out of our funding. So hence we've said unfunded. But I think the words we may need to add in the bracket is that unfunded from external parties. This comes through from our budget, and we do that on a prioritization basis. So following the list that we get in terms of what the requirements are, we then prioritize from most important to least important, and we then look at what we can get out of our particular budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And then the 80 billion investment that I was talking about earlier, I'd really like to see how that's broken down into various projects, almost a line item schedule for that 80 billion rand investment. Because if we don't consider what you're putting money into or what you're potentially investing in, we're essentially allowing you to run with a project that we don't know what the costs are associated with the different elements of it. We don't know whether all of those are economically viable. We just have to take your word for it. So I'd really like to see a detailed breakdown of that 80 billion rand investment that you're talking about. Chair, my last comment relates to Pelchem. So Pelchem has been a pain in NECSA's side for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been involved with NECSA, which is 6 years. And although the deficit has narrowed over that time, we're still talking about an entity that is not profitable and is not showing any real signs of turning around and becoming a profitable entity. So, Mr. Nicol, can you give us an idea of when we can expect to see a profitable Pelchem, and if there's any hope for Pelchem at this stage?
Okay. Can I do the first question first, and I'll get the second one? On the first question, Loiso, we have presented before, haven't we, the breakdown of the 80 billion in the business plan?
Yes, sure.
So
I can provide a high level for that.
Can you provide a high level for that? And
yes,
the 80 billion is an estimate, please, Honourable Malem. We're trying to give an indication of the kind of money we're talking about. Each one of those will need a business case. We're not going to get 80 billion from anybody without a meaningful business case. We recognize that. In terms of Pelchem, you are absolutely correct. Pelchem has been for historically a management reason. We think we've resolved that one. And an equipment, there's 3 problems. It's not scaled essentially on some of the areas to actually play in the big market. And we've got to work on the equipment it's got is 1980s equipment that in many cases is well past its corroded through date. And but so in terms of target, we target. I look at the numbers. We're looking at next year breaking even. What has happened is we've closed down some sections. So, for example, the HF plant, the hydrogen fluoride plant, which was the main plant, was extremely small by world standards. We have closed it down. We've now turned that. We still supply the customers. We now have become a trader in HF. We import HF from overseas, and we're looking at a business case to get a partner on board so they develop a new decent-sized HF plant. We were looking at about 5,000 tons a year was our capacity at NECSA. A commercial plant's about 60,000 tons. So we're looking. We have a business case put together. We're starting discussions with people. Again, nothing's written down to actually establish at Coca an HF plant. In other areas, we are moving more into the specialty chemical, and we would have made money this last year, we think, except for the fact that one of our principal commodities became a fashionable commodity for the Chinese to make, and they undercut us terribly, and our profit margin went on that one. But essentially, the key issue at Pelchem is we are struggling with do we shut it down? That's been a question for some time. We recognize that. But it is a very lucrative market and whereas NTP is like 20-25% of the world market. In radiopharmaceuticals, Pelchem is like 0.001% of the world market. Only in specialty chemicals do we make a difference. So it's a bad answer for you, I'm sure, Mr. Malam. We are continually raising that. I can go into detail as to what it is we're doing. We believe there's a number of projects which will come off in the next 18 months that should turn that plant round, that situation round. But it is a challenge. It is always a challenge, that one is. I'm sorry it's a bad answer.
Chair, if we can just add a few things from our side.
Of course you can. You can do more.
Thank you. I'll start with the CFO. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Honourable Malam, for the question. So in terms of Pelchem, quite right, we've had some challenges in that space. What we had actually seen is an improved trajectory over those few financial years historically. So if we look at 2023, we're sitting at a loss of 61 million, which reduced to 2024 to 41 million, and the previous financial year to 29 million. This current financial year, there was an issue in terms of the geopolitics and Pelchem being affected by that. What we are doing with that is that we're having discussions with other entities as well. So we do have, for instance, a scheduled engagement with the DTIC, and what they're going to engage us and assist us with is to try and start penetrating and diversifying in terms of the market space. So especially what the CEO mentioned in terms of the Indian and other market, we're also looking at the assistance in terms of getting into that space and increasing the footprint of Pelchem in that space. I think one thing which does assist in the Pelchem environment is with the governance improvements, because historically it had previously been a bit of a disclaimer, and now it's unqualified, and we're now targeting clean. What that assists is that in terms of us going to investors and trying to engage the various engagements we've been having, Pelchem has been forefront in terms of that engagement. So when the investors, for instance, the IDC, have seen the fact that we've got good governance in place, they're willing to consider potentially looking at investment in that space as well. So we do have quite a lot of plethora of strategies trying to see how we can assist in that space as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just to add on that one. So with the Pelchem issue, what we are pushing for is to make sure that we've got markets for our products, and those products must be produced at a good commercial level. Whether it continues as Pelchem in its current construct or in another form, we'll see into that, but we want to stay in the fluorochemical business because there's a huge market potential in there. And then in terms of the breakdown on the estimate of 80 billion rands, we estimate that the multi-purpose reactor with its appendages in the form of the beam hall lines and equipment will be in the order of 29 billion rands. Secondly, the the small modular reactor, the SMR, we estimate that it will be in the order of 28 billion rands. The front-end fuel cycle and related facilities, we estimate that, as I said earlier, about 21 billion rands, and the remaining balance becomes those of facilities at NTP and some of them at Pelchem. But the big bulk items are really those three: the multi-purpose reactor, the small modular reactor, and the front-end fuel cycle. But we'll share the breakdown going forward. Thank you very much for that pointer.
Thank you very much for your feedback. The only comment I would have is I accept your point that the opportunity for Pelchem is enormous. However, the question has to be asked, are we able to compete? And if we're not able to compete effectively, should we be playing in that market? So that's really something that you need to evaluate and come back to us and say, hey, we can compete. Right now, it appears that you can't.
No,
The
thank
point
you
is well
very much.
noted. Thank you.
Yes,
Comment.
I think it was a comment from Honorable Manal. And our time for this discussion is actually up. Thank you very much to NECSA. Thank you, Chairperson, the CEO, CFO, and the team for coming today, for giving us this report. Next, Secretary Ariko, what will be on the agenda?
We are dealing with internal matters, Chair. Just some outstanding minutes that we need to consider and adopt, Chair. It's about 5 sets of minutes, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to NECSA.
Thank you very much, Chair. And goodbye.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.
Good now. Let me just open it, Chair.
Yes, Ariko, we can proceed.
Okay, so the first minutes, Chair, is Wednesday, 25 March, where discussions and deliberations on the processes relating to the filling of vacancies of the NNR board, the consideration and adoption of the oversight visit report, and then consideration of minutes. There's the attendance by committee members. Chair, discussions, first the criteria, possible interview questions, processes going forward, the consideration and adoption of the oversight visit report, the minutes, and then resolutions, and then announcements, Chair. That's the meeting of the 25th of March. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ariko. To the members, we've just went through the minutes as well, because we got them earlier. Who else says we can maybe adopt, or do we need to add anything on the minutes? Honorable Bapti.
Thank you, Chair. I will move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Bapti. Honorable Mylan.
Chair, I'm happy to second the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you very much. The minutes has been adopted. Thank you, Ariko. Is there any other?
Yes, Chair. As I say, there's 5, so there's another 4, Chair.
No, we can
Let me just get it quickly, Chair. On the 22nd, we had 2 meetings. The one in the morning from 8 to 9:30, where we dealt with an update on the shortlisting of the NNR board applications. Members will recall this is where Lee briefed the committee that morning. That's it, yes, Chair.
Thank you, Ariko. Honorable members, anyone who wants to adopt or add or subtract anything on the minutes as presented? Honorable Mayor.
Chair, I propose the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Bapti.
Thank you, Chair. I will second the proposal.
Thank You minutes have been adopted. Seconded.
Sorry, Chair, I was too quick. That was the 22nd that we just adopted. But we also had the 1st of April, the election of the chair. My apologies for that, Chair, and to the members. But this is Wednesday, 1 April, where we elected the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Electricity and Energy. That's it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ariko. Honorable members, here are the minutes.
I move to accept, Chair, Honorable Thring.
Thank you, Honorable Thring. Honorable Bapti.
Thank you, Chair. I will second the motion.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bapti. We can move to the next minutes.
The next set is also the 22nd, the evening meeting, Chair, where members worked overtime. Briefing by the Department of Electricity and Energy on the revised strat plan and annual performance plan and budget vote number 10. And then again, further discussions and deliberations on the shortlisting of the NNR board applications. Attendance by committee members, parliamentary support staff, opening remarks by the chairperson, presentation by DE, discussions on the shortlisting of the NNR board applications, and then adjournment, Chair, at 11:30 the evening. Thank you, Chair. Those are the minutes of 22 April.
Thank you, Ariko. Honorable members, do we need to add or subtract anything on the minutes? Or do we adopt the minutes? Honorable Bapti.
Chairperson, I will move to adopt the minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Bapti. Any seconder? Honorable Melon.
Sure, I'm happy to second these minutes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Melon. The minutes have been adopted.
Then the last set of minutes, Chair, last week, Thursday, the 23rd, where we were briefed by the 4 entities, the NNR, NERSA, SANEDI, and Narwadi on their APPs and budgets for 26-27, Chair. The attendance register, both MPs and parliamentary support, opening remarks by the chair, presentations, discussions, and we finished at 5 to 8, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ariko. These are the last sets of minutes. Honorable members, anything to add, subtract, or we adopt? Honorable members, Honorable Bapti.
Yeah, I will move to adopt the minutes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bapti. Any seconder? Any seconder? Honorable Thring?
I second, Chair.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Oh, thank you. 2 seconds. Thank you very much. I think we're done with adoption of the minutes now. Thank Chair. Secretary, is there anything else?
No, that's it for this meeting, Chair.
Okay, announcements.
Just to indicate, Chair, that we'll reconvene at 5 p.m. this afternoon, where we'll be briefed by Eskom on their shareholder compact and budget for 26-27, Chair. Yeah, so those are what we're dealing with this afternoon, Chair. The link has been forwarded to members as well for that meeting and all the documents for that meeting, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Thank you to honorable members. The meeting has been adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Ngiyabonga
Recording
kakhulu.
stopped.